Just an hour ago, we were talking with, together with Nuria Oliver, and we were exploring how to have a more ethical algorithm or how to set some standards to avoid some processes or behaviors that generate a negative impact on society. And it's clear and it's crucial to understand that the challenge with AI is to set in a direction that favors its inclusive, resilient and sustainable use. And as we were saying before, and we talked a lot about it and we heard a lot about it, to find a way to regulate properly. That's why I would like to invite to join me in this session about operationalizing ethics in AI and regulatory standards to Renata Ávila, CEO at Open Knowledge Foundation. You can join me in the stage, Renata, whenever you want. Agustí Cerrillo, Professor of Administrative Law at WOC, welcome in. And he will be hosting the session, María Celia Fernández, Professor of Social, Ethical and Legal Issues at Technical University of Madrid. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation and the presentation. Today, AI technologies and tools play a key role in every aspect of our life, as they have become a part of our everyday lives, from healthcare to online banking, rideshare apps, smart assistants, or even law enforcement.
You can take out your face mask while you're in the stage, and then afterwards you set it. It's going to be clearer. Thanks.
AI negative effects, impacts are not science fiction anymore. But these challenges have grown very quickly. They go from algorithm bias or data privacy, transparency, and accountability. AI is indeed an opportunity, but the challenge is to set a new direction that favors its inclusive, resilient, and sustainable use by local governments. How can this be achieved and through which frameworks? During this session, we will address and overview different tools and actions seeking ethical standards in order to ensure that AI is safe, lawful, accountable, fair, inclusive, and in line with fundamental rights and freedoms. We have 3 speakers in this roundtable. Unfortunately, the first one couldn't attend personally. The first speaker is Werner Stengg. He's a digital expert at the European Commission, Cabinet of Executive Vice President Margrethe Vestager in Belgium. He held different head of unit positions in the European Commission, dealing with e-commerce, online platforms, public interest services, online gambling, and the better regulation agenda. We are going to have a small video he has recorded previously, and I hope you can enjoy it.
Well, many thanks for inviting me to take part in this conference. And I'm very sorry that I cannot be among you in person today. Nonetheless, I'd like to share with you the European Commission's policy towards artificial intelligence. And it is an ambitious one. We really want to make Europe world-class in the development of artificial intelligence, but in a secure way, trustworthy, human-centered. That's the ambition. And just before the beginning of the pandemic, it's now 1.5 years ago, we had announced already that we want to create an ecosystem of trust in Europe, but also an ecosystem of excellence. So that on the one hand, our regulation would address the risks, the societal risks associated with AI. But on the other hand, together with the member states, we would be trying to boost investment, research, and innovation in AI. Because one thing is clear, if we want AI to flourish and be used in Europe, people need to trust that AI is safe and serves them well. And we want AI to be used in Europe, to be clear, because we always talk about regulation. But already today, AI brings a lot of benefits to our lives. And we've only seen the beginning of it, I would argue. As we speak, it is saving lives thanks to better medical diagnosis. It contributes to the Green Deal by helping farmers to optimize their resources. It has even been used by engineers in Paris to rebuild Notre Dame Cathedral. So these are examples that illustrate what we want AI in Europe to be, a force for progress, if you want. But to make that possible, we need to build trust in AI systems. And to do so, our proposed legal framework doesn't look at the technology as such. We're not saying AI is good or bad. We're looking at how it is used and what for. So doing so, we have taken a proportionate approach, a risk-based approach. And that's grounded on one very simple logic. The higher the risk that a specific AI may cause to our lives, the stricter the rules. So on this basis, we've classified the use of AI in 4 categories. As in a pyramid, we have a large bottom where we find the great majority of AI applications that represent minimal or no risk at all. For instance, filters that recognize spam messages and block them from entering our inbox, or the use of AI in a factory to minimize the amount of waste. We don't need new rules to cover this. A bit higher up in the pyramid are then the low-risk use cases, such as a chatbot that helps us book a ticket. These are use cases that are allowed, of course, but will be subject to transparency. The aim is to make it very clear to users that they are interacting with a machine. But if they're fine with this, they can get on with it. Once we are getting closer to the top of the pyramid, we find the high-risk use cases. And that's the main focus of our framework. These are the use cases that are considered high risk because they interfere with important aspects of our lives. Here we are talking about AI used to filter through the CVs of candidates that apply for university, that apply for a job, or systems that will assess whether I'm worthy enough to get a new credit line from my bank, or a software used in a self-driving car or in a medical device, and which may bring new risks to my safety or health. So those are the systems that will be subject to a new set of strict obligations because they could potentially have a huge impact on our lives. First, AI developers, providers must feed their systems with high quality data just to make sure that the results don't come out biased or discriminating. Second, they need to provide detailed documentation about how the AI system works. It's all about explainability. Thirdly, they must share substantial information with the users of the systems to help them understand and properly use the AI systems within the parameters for which they were developed. Fourth, we need an appropriate level of human oversight, both in the design and in the implementation of the AI. AI is an aid to decision making. It should not replace it. And finally, they must respect the highest standards of accuracy, of robustness, of cybersecurity, extremely important. Now, once we arrive at the top of our risk pyramid, we find those very limited uses of AI that we prohibit altogether because we simply consider them unacceptable, not in tune with our values in Europe. This may be subliminal techniques to cause harm, physical harm, psychological harm to someone, in particular for vulnerable people like children. Think of a toy that uses voice assistance to manipulate a child into doing something dangerous. Such use cases have no place in Europe. We therefore propose to ban them. The same prohibition applies to AI uses that go against our fundamental values. That's, for instance, a social scoring app that would rank people based on their social behavior. Imagine a citizen that violates traffic rules and pays rent too late, and as a result has a poor social score. That could influence then how authorities interact with them, how the banks treat their credit requests, and so on. And there's one very specific use of AI, hotly debated from day one, that fits in both the high risk and the prohibited categories. And that's remote. No, it's remote biometric identification, because biometric identification can also be used for many purposes. Some of them are not problematic at all. For instance, when it's used one-to-one at border controls, or when we are asked to sign in with our fingerprints or use facial recognition to identify ourselves. In our proposal, we focus on remote biometric identification, where many people are screened at the same time. We treat any use of remote biometric identification for whatever purpose and by whoever as highly risky from a fundamental rights point of view. That's why we subject it to even stricter rule than other high-risk use cases. But there's one situation where that may not be enough. And that's when remote biometric identification is used in real time by law enforcement authorities in public spaces. There's no room for mass surveillance in our society. That's why in our proposal, this use in public areas is prohibited by principle, with very narrowly defined exceptions, strictly limited and regulated. Extreme cases as when the police needs it to search for a missing child or a terrorist on the run. Altogether, and to sum up, this legal framework should shape the trust that we must build if we want people and businesses to embrace AI solutions. And that brings me to my last message for today. Regulation is not necessarily the enemy of innovation. Not only because innovation requires trust to be taken up, but also because of the legal certainty that our framework will bring to all those in Europe that do research on AI, that try to bring AI solutions to the market, and those that would wish to use them. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the video. Then it's the turn of Agustí Cerrillo. He's a professor in the UOC here in Barcelona. He holds a PhD in law and a degree in law and in political science. He's professor of administrative law at this university. He's also the ombudsman of the university and a member of the Legal Advisory Commission of the Generalitat de Catalunya. Well, your turn. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you. I would like to initiate my speech thanking the organizers for the invitation to participate this afternoon here. I would like to focus my speech on one of what I think is the main regulatory challenges of the use of artificial intelligence, and in particular when this technology is used by the public sector, by government, which is transparency. Sorry. Doesn't work.
Doesn't work?
Yeah, okay. That's it. As is usually said, algorithms are a black box. That means that sometimes it's really difficult to know how they work, how they take decisions. This opacity of algorithms can be caused by different, can have different causes. Sometimes it's a strictly technical opacity, which means that as algorithms are really complex or they change over the time as they have new data for automatic learning, this is difficult to know how they work. But there are also other causes, like legal causes of opacity, of the algorithm's opacity, because some algorithms are protected by commercial clauses or are protected by other secret law that prevents to take them as transparent. And also there are other causes that I could name them organizational opacity causes, which are those that, in the case, for example, when the government use artificial intelligence, which has not been designed by their own services, and they even don't know how these algorithms work. So when public sector, when government uses algorithms, there can be some risks, like the fact that the own government don't know how algorithms work. So they use this artificial intelligence for decision taking, but they cannot explain how these decisions are taken or which are the data the algorithms are taken into account in order to take those decisions. And when opacity is in the realm of a government, it can also have other risks like discrimination or the difficulty to find which are the errors that some algorithms can have. In this point, there are many institutions, there are many academics who have said that transparency is one of the main principles to guarantee trustworthy artificial intelligence. Like, for example, the paper from the high-level expert group on artificial intelligence in 2019. So transparency is important in the designing of algorithms, but it also is important to oversight and to control how algorithms work. Nowadays, there is an agreement to consider that transparency is an ethical principle. That means that when designers design algorithms, they have to take into account that they can guarantee enough information about how the algorithm works. That means that transparency includes traceability, explainability, and also communication. But we could also agree that nowadays transparency is also a legal principle. For example, if we read the proposal for a regulation of the European Parliament and the Council on artificial intelligence, also known the Artificial Intelligence Act, it states different rules in order to concrete this, in order to highlight this principle of transparency. Depending on the risk level of each algorithm, the mechanisms that should be used to guarantee transparency will be different. But the main problem we have when we try to guarantee transparency of algorithms is that traditional transparency mechanisms like dissemination of information or also like the access to information about algorithms have many limitations. They don't work as they should. So there is a need to set new mechanisms to guarantee transparency of algorithms. In this line, there are some regulations that are stating new obligations. For example, the obligation, the duty to disseminate specific information about algorithms. This could be the example of the European proposal. There are other experiences like those that define new rights. For example, the Barcelona City Hall is passing a Charter of Digital Rights that state specific duties and rights in relation with transparency. It's also important to set new control mechanisms. For example, there are some institutions that ask those companies that design algorithms which will be used for public functions to pass an auditing process or to certify the algorithm in order to guarantee the transparency of that algorithm. And there are some proposals all over the world to create new governance bodies with different functions, but one of them would be to guarantee transparency. To conclude, I would like to share with you this sentence from the European White Book on Artificial Intelligence, where, as you can see on the screen, it said that given that artificial intelligence is evolving, the regulatory framework must leave room for cater to further development. So it's important to find the equilibrium among guaranteeing transparency, but also to allow innovation in the development of artificial intelligence. So regulations has to give an effective answer to opacity risk of artificial intelligence, and we also have to guarantee that transparency allows to give enough information and also comprehensible information to all those affected by the use of algorithms. And that's all. Thank you for your attention.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you very much, Agustí. It's the turn of Renata Ávila. Renata is an international lawyer, author, and advocate. She brings nearly 20 years of experience in access to knowledge, freedom of expression, policymaking, and global digital rights. Renata is an affiliate with the Stanford Institute of Human-Centered Artificial Intelligence and a member of the Global Board of Trustees of Digital Future Society. Thank you.
Thank you, and I also have to mention that I'm the newly appointed CEO of Open Knowledge Foundation, and this talk really goes to the core of both the mission of Open Knowledge Foundation and what Digital Future Society is trying to achieve here. So I think that I'm speaking with the two hats here. And one of the important things that we need, that is the main thing of the talk, is how to make it operative. How can we make it happen? Because it is, when we get deep into these talks of regulation, then you land into the reality of a municipality, south of Spain or in somewhere in Greece, and how to deal with this. Because you have, on the one hand, very pressing needs, for example, to control the pandemic, and very pressing needs on the people on fast delivery of, for example, subsidies on social relief after the pandemic of COVID. And on the other hand, you have like these questions. Do I have to act? And just, you know, with the new exceptions on procurement, hire these fast solutions that will help me serve my citizens quickly, to which kind of considerations I have to make. And there's still no regulation, and it will take, like, you know, God knows how many years in the European Union. So my reflection today will be like, how can we do a quick fix to make these ethical principles operative at the city level, and not to, like, you know, wait, sit there out. Yeah, no, it's okay. I don't know. Okay, we'll try to continue speaking.
Yes.
Just in case, let me bring you a mic.
Yeah, that would be fair. Yeah, so I'm sorry about that. I got overexcited about the possibilities of creating our own regulation. so basically, like the situation goes as this: should I wait 5 years and do nothing until the EU decides, and then maybe in 7 years it will be like legislation that is applicable to my municipality and do nothing about it? Or should I experiment from the local point of view and start like framing possible, even hyper-local legal frames for AI? So I will go for the second, of course, because I think that our Werner was saying that regulation shouldn't be incompatible with innovation. And I say, I go one step further and say, like, we can innovate in regulation if we start by the local level. So, and one of the things that it is very interesting to me is how, when we talk about AI, we do not talk about this raw material that makes AI possible, which is data, and all the problems that come. That's one of the departing problems. And one of the things that I have seen at the local level, at the municipal level, is all the innovations on data governance, which can be like the innovations in data governance. We have seen now data trust, data cooperatives, and also emerging digital commons at the city level. And I think that that could be the departing point and the seed of a different approach to AI. Because if citizens get more involved and more active in the data data governance at the city level, perhaps that can be like the beginning of the debate on how then the data will shape the systems that will be deployed on them. And I was thinking of, you know, like on top of my head, how would I like that regulation to be drafted? And I think that we worry a lot about privacy, but just focusing our conversation when we think about the future of AI and the ethics around AI on just privacy is a limited conversation. Of course, it should be privacy by default and by design. considering into the AI systems, but also other values, such as openness and open innovation. Something that it is very interesting about AI is not only like the possible risks, but the incredible impact, social impact that it could have. And of course, I'm challenging here many assumptions, but if I was the mayor of a city, I would try to draft my procurement rules to make sure that if there's a good system, that then that system is open for others to innovate on top of. And a little bit like free software. If we could do, like, you know, create a model of innovation where AI, public interest AI, and public sector AI could open innovative ways for researchers and other members of the local community to look into and to iterate and create new systems. If that would be possible, to create not only accountability at the pre-deployment of the system, but through the development of the system. So not only focus on risk and risk prevention, but also potential and repurposing of these technologies. That would be like one of the ethical things to do with public funding. The second thing is ethically sourced. We have the level of transparency is not only on the algorithm, but it is what is feeding the system. So having a good system to tag the data sets and to check the data sets that are feeding this, because many times that's the source data blind spots in the data set is part of the problem later in the deployment. The other thing is measurable through different points of the process, because it is like, I think that the system of procurement is very non-flexible, so we do not have enough checkpoints at different stages of the process. It's only when the system is deployed, and there's not like, you know, like even us to drive a car, we need to renew our driver's license every now and then. It should be like a system like that, you know, like licenses. Like, okay, you pass the test, maybe we check again in 2 years. And the other thing is insurance. That's a crazy idea, but here's a place for crazy ideas because I'm the mayor for one day. And what if the companies that deploy AI systems would be forced to have, you know, like some insurance policies, so to prevent the damage, the potential, to quantify the damages of the thing, and then pay, because citizens keep paying for the, like, you know, like the mistakes of big companies, and that should stop. And the other thing that I think that it should be privileged is locally sourced. If the AI engineers, if the AI systems are produced locally, then it is not only the code, it is the human aspects to serve society better. And you can go in front of the houses of those engineers if there's mistakes. And also, more importantly and last, it is not only a work of the engineer. AI is a multidisciplinary work, and it is not only code. It is the politics behind it, is the deployment, it is the evaluation systems, is how it's serving people, and we should see it as such. So that said, transparency is great, but it's not enough, and we need, and I think that it's possible while the AI regulation happens at the EU level. I think it is highly possible to start experimenting with hyper-local policy initiatives that will take into consideration a broader positive agenda for AI.
Mm-hmm. Okay, many thanks, Renata. I think we have plenty of ideas here on the table, and I want to invite everyone here, also in the upper stage, to ask questions if you want. Otherwise, I will break the ice in case. In the meantime, they are just thinking. They are so impressed. The new European Union proposal regulation for AI, in my personal opinion, is a bit risk-based, but not so human rights-based. In my opinion, many of the principles, one of them, of course, being transparency, but there are some others like inclusion, participation, etc., must be more present in the regulation. For example, the vision of the users is not so present in the proposal. Do you want to express your opinion on that specific initiative?
Well, I want to answer this one by saying that to me was very disappointing. I'm not European, you know, like, and I think about the global impact of this regulation, and to me was deeply disappointed with the commissioner was presenting the initiative when I realized that security and military uses of AI are excluded. So that is secure, is borders, you know, like is borders, is whatever is exported to the developing world. It is like, and in my experience working against, you know, surveillance systems for like 12 years, if not more, my experience is the military starts using it and experimenting and without any limited, without any accountability, protected by secrecy, then it lands in industry, and then it lands in each and every government, you know, like, so the military has been like an experiment lab all the time for this kind of technologies. And if we do not declare universal restrictions to AI, then the development will continue and continue and continue, and they will realize it's super effective somehow and profitable, and then it will make its way back into our societies, in the local societies. So, or if not, even worse, you will have super protected Europe with these ethical rules, and the rest of the world as a laboratory of these kind of technologies, irrestricted.
Yes. We have one question there, and another one here.
Well, thanks. I apologize for my English. I will try to be brief. I was thinking about what you were saying, Renata, about this hyper-local regularization. If you there would make some if you would distinguish between big and small companies, because, well, this is related also because I was thinking the whole journey that we are talking about how introduce the human rights perspective in technology, but we are not talking about like the big companies that have names and surnames and that are being the ones that are conditioning how the world is built up. So in this sense, I'm trying to connect it with this open source philosophy that you were trying to apply and trying to go also a little farther from digital humanism to digital sovereignty. This idea of local regulation, which I think is a very good idea, also related to privacy and how we can protect different profiles of people. Yeah, I was wondering if you will connect it with this, making a difference between big and small companies, and also how we have to deal with privacy concerning data, and also thinking of privacy as a collective issue. I don't know if you can understand what I'm asking.
I will try to respond and we can discuss later as well during the break. But basically, that's the vision. You know, like the problem is that we cannot. Like, there's big AI, and there's the possibility of locally sourced AI. And if I was the mayor of the city, and I'm not in campaign, I'm not even national here. If I was the mayor of the city, what I would think is, I want these wonderful universities that I have here, these small companies, to start playing with AI, because AI couldn't be like, you know, an exclusive prerogative of big tech. And I want to give them the opportunity, so I will probably craft the procurement rules in a way to, create incentives for consortia, local private sector, universities, municipality, to start like producing like small experiments, small experiments to explore the potential. And of course, this embedded in that will be like the main source of data, the local data, exploring also collective rules of governance. For example, if we think, okay, we will do an AI system to distribute better the way that the green areas in the city are allocated, or things like that, things meaningful to people, close to them, that they can have a say, okay, we will be okay with this experimentation in our city, let's see how it goes, and if not, let's have a board, community board, on how this technology is deployed. And not only that, it can be even, you know, with non-personal data, but local data, the first experiments. It's just the possibilities, because the big tech, we have a big problem. And the big problem that we have with big tech is the global trade rules that restrict even the European Union to regulate the way they want. And so that's a different problem of public law, of course.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to add something?
No, I just to say that I think, as I said before, that it's important to create a governance system that guarantees all these values, particularly when algorithms and artificial intelligence is used by public sector. So, you know, otherwise they will be in the hands of big companies and without the knowledge to know how to guarantee rights, civic rights, and also public principles in the use of algorithms in public functioning. No?
Yes, no doubt. Okay, another question there?
Yeah, I have a question to Renata that's about the scale. When you talk about the, well, like we know like the European Commission or European Union, and the idea to deploy artificial intelligence or deploy the artificial intelligence in terms of huge bureaucracy and so on. So we have like two aspects: the municipality, the city level, and the European Union level. There is a good approach when you talk about city, because it's there is more connection with society. There are more common approach, like oriented. And we talk about European Union or states, we are talking about miniaturization. We have a lot of aspects that involve it. But the problem here that I see, that's always ask myself, is about scale. Like how scale up from the city, a project, a deployment, to national scale or even a European Union scale. It's a bit, it's not like to have an answer, but like you have some idea how to scale up this. Like we have here in Barcelona the Decode project that's very good, that a lot of pilots that give us an idea how to deploy in terms of a human or, like a human-centered technology. But when we talk about European Union, it's too much bureaucracy, like regulation and so on. So how deal with these two approaches, one very powerful and one very focused on society?
You know, one of the beautiful things of cities and the emergent city diplomacy that we are seeing here at this Smart City Expo, for example, this week, is that they're very versatile entities that can work together across borders without too much bureaucracy. And I see that that's the I think that there's no restriction in the European Union in order to work as a block of cities to go back to the EU level and then down. So I have seen, for example, we are doing at the Open Knowledge Foundation for the next year, the Open Data Day around ocean data. And we're trying to connect all the cities in the Mediterranean, all the cities in the Adriatic, all the cities united by a common resource, and how we can pull together data around that common resource and coordinate to create these kind of systems. I think that we shouldn't be, the idea of the European Union was not to be limited by the borders of, to explore possibilities beyond the borders of the nation state. So I think that, again, put innovation in regulation and in practice. I think that that's the kind of things that we should explore more. Yes. And I sometimes I'm a little bit put off by, maybe because I come from a small country, like the the overwhelming bureaucracy of the European Union and the lawmaking process. But I think that we need to, in my mind, we need to pilot the possible AI before that regulation passes, so we can show concrete examples on possible ways to do the things differently before the new European Parliament comes into place and approves or creates a Frankenstein of whatever, like the final draft of the regulation. If we can show instead of just telling, then there's where the power resides.
Thank you very much, Renata. I don't know if you want to add something else to end. Well, I think we have 5 minutes left, but unfortunately, our timer is not working. But I was trying to calculate in my brain, and if we don't have any more questions, let me just, well, of course, thank the 3 of the speakers, because I think they had a very good vision on each of the concepts they had spoken. Of course, the orientations from the European Union in relation with these proposals and all this, that's okay. The vision of the transparency as a technical, legal, and organizational point of view, I think it must be taken into account. And finally, the different proposals from Renata were really very good, especially the one around an open public interest AI. I think that's something really very, very nice. Repurposing technology, creating a new system of procurement at the local level, or an insurance system at the local level. I wanted to finish this roundtable by saying that sometimes that kind of issues may seem to the general public as something really a bit far from our possibilities. These things related with regulation tend to be a bit formalist, bureaucracy and all that. But what we are talking about is that artificial intelligence is something that is developing rapidly, with no limits at the moment, with no single legislation at the moment. And what we have is lots of risks which will have really very huge impacts on human lives. And what is happening is that big tech has huge lobbies in the European Union that will try to finally pass a regulation that goes by with their interests and not so much with the human rights. And personally, I'm a bit worried about that, having in mind that Europe, maybe we are a very, well, we have strong democracies and all that, good legislation frameworks. But we are like that. We are in the hands of big tech, and that's something like that. The alternative is the other system, maybe China, who is recently looking for ethical codes, and they seem to be very concerned about ethics. But, well, they don't have a history of, well, a very human rights-based regulation. So I think this issue is really relevant, and we have to make an effort to really tell people all this with good vocabulary, in comprehensible language. Well, I don't know if you want to add something else, Renata? You were...
Well, just that I believe in the local and you know, in participatory processes at the local level, because if you tell you don't tell people, no, it's not AI, it's the system where you will have, like, you know, distributed like a bonus of 50 euro for culture. And this is the way we are going to do it. And this is what, but where are you getting the data from? Here, like, you know, explaining the system step by step and listening to the community. That is a slow process. It's slow AI, a little bit like slow food, you know, slow AI, locally sourced, slow AI, with listening to the community. Like, it's a different concept, you know, like, and I think that that's the point is, we can delegate to one of the big tech companies to deploy this, and maybe it will be like set up and running in 1 week, but it's not ours. So I think that the early deployments of slow AI is a good investment to go to the proper AI next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all of you. It's been great listening to you. I just get some of the words you all expressed. I heard also from Europe, building trust. What is our data used for? Some relevant things. You talked about transparency, about principles, really relevant things which sound like normal but should be there. Slow AI, I think that's a good one. Accountability. And I would say, don't be that pessimistic. You see, for example, there is a big tech who was just fined 7 years after with 2,450 million euro for something different, which was not AI, you're right, but for some search. But I'm sure we will make it slowly, cooking it slowly. So, well, thank you very much. And while we're cooking it...